In this example, we're going to illustrate from the grain storage management decision, we're going to illustrate an accrual accounting system and how revenue would be recorded. Now, I hope you've already listened to the cash system and understood in the cash system how the revenue is recorded only when the money changes hands. However, in an accrual system, we're going to record revenue based upon when the production took place. So what happens is in 2014, we had 30,000 bushels produced. We sold at harvest 10,000 and stored 20,000. But at the end of the year, which we're going to assume the fiscal year ends in December 31st, at the end of the year, we're going to place a value on that $20,000. In other words, we're going to call the elevator at that day and say, okay, could it sell for today? And we're going to record that value into a chart of accounts for grain production, and we're going to consider that revenue in 2014. So it would look like this. In 2014, you'd have cash sales would be 10,000, and you'd be selling that at $3.80. That's $38,000. But then at the end of the year, December 31st, you'd have an inventory account. In other words, this would be part of your chart of accounts, and you'd have 20,000 bushels of grain. And let's just suppose that it was worth 385. In other words, we determine that by estimating that value by calling the who we would actually sell to. So that is $77,000. Now remember, that's not a cash sale. That's just what that grain would be worth that day. Not what you think it's going to be worth later, but what it's worth that day. Okay? So when you take the cash sale and that inventory value, you get a total revenue of $115,000. And that would be recorded as revenue for the year 2014. Now, what happens in 2015? Well, in 2015, you actually have a cash sale. Now, again, we're going to assume that everything sold in 2015 for this illustration. You'd have a cash sale of 55,000 bushels, and you're going to sell those at $3.95. Okay? And we know that that turns out to be $217,250. However, you've had an inventory value of 77,000 at the end of 2014. So what would happen now when you sell that 55,000 here in 2015, it actually reduces that inventory. In other words, that 77,000 comes out of your chart of accounts. So you would minus that 20,000 bushels that were sold at 385. That 77,000 would be a minus, and you would actually have total income of $140,250 in 2015. Now what we've done is we've actually put the values, the revenue, into the correct year with the production. The fact that the grain was valued at 385 right here at the end of 2014 and it sold for 395, and that's a 10-cent increase. Well, some people wonder, well, wait a minute, why wouldn't that 10-cent increase go back in 2014? Well, that wouldn't be accurate because that 10-cent increase happened in 2015. So you're going to get the benefit of 10 cents on that 20,000 bushels is going to be actually credited to 2015 when that extra 10 cents took place. So when you sold all of the grain in 2015 for that 217,000, what you would subtract is the 20,000 bushels in storage that were valued at 385 back in 2014, and then that gives you a net amount. Now, using this accrual system, now what I can do, it's much easier for me to compare this number from a management perspective in 2014 and this number from a management perspective in 2015. Now I've got a more accurate way to compare the 2 years in terms of my management and my management strategies, whereas the cash system gives me a very small number one year and a very large number in the next year.